All right already. I've read your comments. I got it. I'm Jamie. This is Dead Dodge Garage, and this is dumb. I know it's dumb. I knew it was dumb when I did it. If you haven't been following along with this 318 build on Engine Wednesdays, this is a relatively, let's say, medium horsepower engine I'm putting together for my friend Mark's Barracuda. It's got some nice pieces in it, like a forged crank, factory rods with floating pins, KB pistons, a crank ground by Organ cams, and some other nice stuff. We wanted to add a windage tray to this engine, and you can no longer buy the factory bolts that would go in these main caps and allow for that. So we got a stud kit from Milodon, which I do occasionally insist on pronouncing wrong. The overarching theme of the previous video was aftermarket parts are terrible, and I stand by that. The instructions for these studs from Milodon left something to be desired. They were misleading on the paperwork compared to what was written on the box as to whether this set of studs would work for our 318 or not. As several commenters noticed, this is a universal stud set. These same main studs can be used in big block Chevrolets to mount a windage tray of this type. And that's fine. They use the same thread, they use a similar length bolt, and there should be some way of making them work here. According to Milodon, there is. If you just run a bottoming tap all the way down these holes, they should work. Well, I did that, and it looked to me like this shoulder, which is a larger diameter than the threads, was bottoming out in the block, and I was out of room. You've got to understand something about making YouTube videos. When you get yourself into a schedule like I have, you kind of have to keep getting videos out on that schedule. And when I ran into this issue, I didn't have many other choices than to put this engine together and move on, fully aware that I could always circle back and fix it, like I'm about to do now. The cardinal sin I committed in that video was stacking a pair of locking washers under the hardened washer that came with the stud kit. The reason I chose these washers is because they happen to be the right diameter, the same diameter as that hardened washer, and they fit in this area. A typical flat washer does not. I knew when I did it that these may not be up to the task of holding together in the bottom end of an engine, and it was probably a bad idea. I decided at that point I'd get more hardened washers because I figured those, unlike this probably slightly softer material, may not compress and would probably hold up better here. However, after the video came out, I had a conversation with certain uncles Tony about this, and he said that's not a good idea. Even with the better hardware in there, you still have an opportunity for those flat washers to rub on each other, allowing the cap to walk back and forth, which is already a concern we have in this engine, because even though I had this fit improved by the machine shop, it still doesn't lock in there as tightly as I would have liked. I truly believed that a couple hardened washers stacked like this would almost certainly be fine on the street, low power, but you're not going to be putting main studs in your engine if you're building a low power deal. At high RPM, there is going to be an opportunity for these caps to walk, and that is the last thing on earth we want. In that video, I made a comment that turns out to be incorrect, and so I need to correct the record now. I said that the main caps are the same height in all LA engines, and that turns out to not be true. 273s and 318s use a cap like this. 340s and 360s use a taller cap like this. If you can't already tell just by looking, the difference in the height between those two caps is the difference between these generic studs working and not working. Here's our 318 main bolt on the left, our 360 main bolt in the middle, and the generic 81182 Milodon stud on the right. You can see here the height difference in this shoulder compared to the 360 main bolt. That could still be an issue, but by the time you chase the threads, as Milodon suggests, and this stud ends up farther down in the block, you should have enough room to get a nut and washer on that. Here's how much farther into the main bolt holes in our 318 block these studs would have to go to be able to install that nut and washer. Milodon insists that this should work, but I don't know that there's 6 or 7 threads of material left down there. In the 360, it's only 3 or 4 threads. And I proved in the last video there's definitely about that much depth down there available to be tapped. So again, I could see that working. Also on the 360, the holes are open on the underside, which would definitely make this easier as well. The 360 cap being a different dimension came as no surprise. But the 340 cap, that I found very interesting. I have always understood the 340 to be the same in the bottom end as the 318, but that is simply not the case. The 340 uses taller main caps and longer bolts, just like a 360. Given what these engines were always intended to do, that makes plenty of sense. Extra beef in the bottom end is a great thing when you're going to be spinning to 6,000 plus RPM all the time. The factory tray was held on with 4 special main bolts that have a shoulder hole like this. inside that little extension. These are no longer available, or we already would have bought a set and they'd be in this engine right now. We could have avoided this entire mess. I only have one set of these for my 273 and I'm not giving them up. I'm pretty sure these were available until relatively recently. You can still find them listed online in some places, but no one actually has them. Now we have figured out the ultimate fix for this, but I want to round this video out by showing you all of the main fastener options. These are ARP main bolts. They come with washers. I've had these on the shelf forever and ever and ever, which is why they're getting all rusty and nasty. These don't have any provision for windage tray mounting whatsoever. I don't actually know why you'd ever want to use this, because it seems like in any application where you need more lower end strength, you're probably going to want a tray. That's why I've never installed them in anything, and I will continue to not do that. I suppose I could put 2 of them in the thrust cap in every engine I build for the next 5 engines. When we couldn't get factory parts, I went looking for an aftermarket tray setup and found the Milodon. It stands to reason that if you're going to use their tray, you're going to use their special studs. No problem. Well, except that they don't fit, of course. Obviously, I'm aware that ARP makes main bolts for these engines, but I was not aware that ARP also makes a set of main studs. You can tell right away these are going to solve our problem because they have a much shorter shoulder here. Interestingly, the height of these threads is similar and the overall length of the stud is exactly the same. We already know that this puts our tray somewhere that works, but it is nice the shoulder stud is cut a little bit lower. We're going to be able to get it closer to the crankshaft now, so that also is a point to the good. This is a full set of fasteners for the entire bottom end of the engine. That costs like $105. This set of 4 studs from Milodon cost like $80. The way I see it, this is probably the way to go moving forward. If you need to get a windage tray in there and you want to add some strength to the bottom end of your LA at the same time, get the ARPs. These are going to fit a 360 or 340 as well. The nut will sit right here on those. Now obviously we're going to read the instructions before we put these in, because I always do that. You're supposed to chase all the holes in the block. That was done by my machine shop. I did notice the previous bolts and these studs going in very nice. ARP studs get screwed in hand tight. You do not reef or torque them in any way. The Milodons actually suggested torquing their studs with an Allen or a double nut setup to somewhere between 5 and 10 foot-pounds. It was suggested to me that I use Loctite on the studs. They do note here in the instructions that you can do that if you want the studs to never come back out. I see no need for that at all. The important things to know about ARP fasteners, you need to use their lubricant when you're putting them together, and you need to use their torque specs, which are higher than the factory specs. There are a couple odd things about this set. You'll notice I've got bolts in the back instead of studs. On the small block Chrysler, the oil pump hangs over this main bolt, so we can't put a stud in that position. Or if we do, we need to cut the extra threads off it so the pump can clear. There's some extra hardware included in this kit, so you have some options. For one thing, they supplied 2 12-point nuts. Apparently that can help with oil pan clearance in some situations, although I do notice they're actually taller, not shorter than the hex ones. The other option, as explained in the instructions, is these 2 bolts that are included. And you can omit the washer on this bolt. I believe, looking at this, I've got enough room for it, so I'm going to go ahead, pull that bolt back out, and put the washer in. They do include 10 studs. Interestingly, 5 of those studs have a shoulder stud, like for a tray. This may be for certain oil pickup setups that could have a support tab if they go to like a front sump or something. Can't say I've ever seen one of those in a small block, but I've seen them in like newer engines. Anyway, I don't know why that is. I'm not sure you'd ever need that 5th shoulder stud, but that's what they give you. If you chose to use all of the studs, you could put these low pro ones at the back, you could put that tall one in one of these positions, and I'm pretty sure it would line up with the mid sump here. So the first step again is screwing the studs into the block by hand. You can use an Allen wrench to speed this up, but you certainly do not want to torque them down with that. As you can see, these are screwing right in with no issue, so I feel good about those threads. Okay, in this case, it is going slightly farther than the factory bolt did, and I did have to carefully snug it down with this. Do not torque that stud again. It should just be hand tight. The stud threads into the block do not need the special ARP lube, but these bolts do. So I've done that, and I've also made a huge mess with the lube on both sides of the washer and the head of the bolt. Hopefully it's obvious that the threads where the nuts go do get a copious amount of the ARP lube. Some ARP washers have a special face on one side. There will be a chamfer in there. It looks like this. The ones that came with these studs do not have that. They do have a slightly rounder face, and so I'm putting that upward toward the nut, but I don't think it's very important in this case. Interestingly, the listing for these studs says that they fit 318s all the way up to 440s. I don't know why a 440 would need these studs, because typically a big block is going to use a tray that's sandwiched in here. Either the factory type tray with a gasket on top and bottom, or the one-piece O-ring style gasket and tray setups that go in there. I've never seen a big block one that mounts on studs like this. Maybe Milodon makes one, don't know. And now I've got all these fasteners torqued into place. As with all main engine fasteners, you want to do this in 3 stages, with the ultimate ARP spec being 110. I did this in stages of something like 40, 80, 110 foot-pounds. And yes, I said foot-pounds, not pound-feet. Yeah. Welcome to America. Enjoy your stay. I did also reset the thrust, for the 3rd time. Still good. Now there is one other detail to consider. These nuts and studs do offer more clamping force than the factory bolts. For that reason, if you're going to run studs, it is very ideal to have your block finished with the studs in place. This engine, of course, got the main tunnel honed, and it would have been wise to do that with these on there. It's a little late now. All I can tell you is this engine turns just as nicely as it ever did, so if there is any subtle deformation in these caps, I don't think it's a major issue. Oh yeah, the tray can sit much lower now. Low enough to contact the rod bolts. So obviously we're going to have to raise this up, and I will ensure that we've got an 1/8 inch of room at least around all components attached to the crankshaft. I am happy that it's going to end up further this way toward the crank. It'll be more effective there, but again, it's very important that it doesn't run into things. And indeed, our oil pump does clear that bolt head with the washer in place. It's not even close, in fact. Obviously, there's a whole lot more to do here, but I feel a whole lot better now that we have a set of studs that actually fit this engine, and this is something you need to keep in mind if you're going to try and fit one of these trays. Here's the part number for the ARP stud kit that actually works. 240-5501. Again, they say that these fit big blocks. I'm not sure why you'd ever need the shoulder studs, but it's an option, I guess. I've said this before, but I'll repeat it anyway. I'm not some engine building guru. I'm not a machinist. I've picked up a lot of things over the years, but at the end of the day, I am just some guy. I do not know everything. I am not going to get everything right. I'm going to make mistakes. I'm going to say things wrong. And unfortunately, occasionally, we're going to have to go back and correct things. But either way, I hope you learned something important about putting studs in an aftermarket tray in your small block Chrysler. I know I did. With any luck on the next Engine Wednesday, we're doing 273 stuff. So stay tuned for that. Until next time, as ever, thank you for watching. And remember, if you're gonna dumb, don't do it on the internet.